My name is Caleb. I am 35 years old, and every morning at 6:30 a.m. I wake up to the sound of the Pacific Ocean crashing against the cliffs and the sight of Vesper. She usually sleeps with her back to me, her long dark hair spilled across the silk pillowcase like a shadow. When she turns over and smiles, it's like a movie scene. She is breathtaking. "Good morning, Caleb," she whispers, her voice like honey. "Morning," I reply, forcing a smile that doesn't reach my eyes. I go through the motions, I kiss her forehead, I tell her she looks beautiful, I walk into our massive walk-in closet and put on a suit that costs more than a house in the Midwest. We live in a mansion made of glass and marble in Malibu. To the outside world, I am Arthur Sterling, a successful tech entrepreneur with a trophy wife. But to me, this house is a gallery of things I don't remember buying, and Vesper is a woman I don't remember falling in love with. 2 years ago, there was an accident. I don't remember the crash, I only remember the waking up. They told me I had severe retrograde amnesia. I knew how to drive a car and run a business, but the emotional map of my life was wiped clean. Vesper was there when I opened my eyes. She cried for 3 hours, holding my hand. She showed me photos of our wedding in Tuscany. She showed me videos of us dancing on a yacht. "We are soulmates, Caleb," she told me. I wanted to believe her. I tried to feel the spark she described. But when I look at her, I feel nothing. It's like looking at a famous painting in a museum. You can see it's beautiful, you can understand why it's valuable, but it doesn't feel like mine. I am trapped in a life that feels like a costume. Vesper is perfect in ways that are exhausting. She knows exactly how I like my coffee. She knows I prefer old jazz to modern pop. She organizes my schedule and looks stunning at every gala we attend. But sometimes, I catch her watching me when she thinks I'm not looking. It's not a look of love. It's a look of measurement. Like she's checking to see if the mask I'm wearing is still in place. One evening, while Vesper was at a charity meeting, I went into the attic. I found a small, battered wooden box hidden behind some old suitcases. Inside wasn't jewelry. It was a dried sprig of lavender and a crumpled receipt from a diner in a small town in Oregon called the Blue Anchor. On the back, a phone number was written in a messy, frantic hand, along with 3 words, "Don't forget me." The handwriting wasn't Vesper's. This was jagged and hurried, it felt like a scream from a past I wasn't allowed to have. I didn't tell Vesper about the box. A week later, I told her I had a business trip to Seattle. Instead, I rented a car and drove south into the rainy forests of Oregon. I found the diner. I sat at the counter, and an older waitress named Mabel looked at me, then froze. Her eyes went wide, and she dropped the spoon she was holding. "Caleb," she whispered. "Is that really you?" "You know me?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Know you?" She laughed, but there were tears in her eyes. "You lived in that cabin on the hill for 3 years. You and Beatrix. We all thought, we heard you moved away after the trouble. Who is Beatrix?" I asked. Mabel leaned over the counter, her voice dropping. "Your wife, Caleb. Beatrix was your wife. Until those people in the black cars came and took you away." I looked at the expensive wedding ring on my finger, the one Vesper told me she placed there in Tuscany. Suddenly, the glass mansion in Malibu felt like it was shattering into 1,000 pieces. The name Beatrix echoed in my head like a bell, but as I sat in that damp Oregon diner, the waitress, whose name tag read Mabel, told me something even more shocking. "You weren't some tech millionaire here, Caleb," she said. Using a name I hadn't heard in years. "You were a carpenter. You built half the bookshelves in this town." Caleb. Not Arthur. My name was Caleb Thorne. I followed Mabel's directions to a small, secluded cabin at the end of a dirt road. It was the polar opposite of the glass mansion in California. It was made of rough-hewn cedar and smelled of wood smoke and old books. I found a key hidden inside a hollowed-out stone near the porch, a muscle memory I didn't even know I had. Inside, the walls were covered in photos. Me, wearing a flannel shirt and covered in sawdust, laughing with a woman who had messy blonde hair and bright, honest blue eyes. Beatrix. That was her name. Not Isabella. Every photo was a testament to a life that felt warm, chaotic, and real. I drove back to California in a trance. When I walked into the mansion, Vesper, the woman I had known as Isabella, was waiting for me in the living room. She was sipping wine, looking out at the sunset. "You're late, darling," she said, her voice cool and clinical. "I went to Oregon," I said flatly. The glass in her hand didn't shatter, but her eyes did. For a split second, the perfect wife mask slipped, revealing something sharp and predatory. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her hand was trembling. "You've been working too hard. Your amnesia is playing tricks on you." "My name is Caleb Thorne," I said, stepping closer. "I'm a carpenter. And you aren't my wife. Who are you working for, Vesper?" She set the wine down and stood up. She didn't look like a trophy wife anymore, she looked like a soldier. "Arthur, or Caleb, or whoever you want to be, you should have stayed in the fog. You were a high-level witness in a federal case against the Sovereign Group. We didn't just save your life, we rewrote it to keep you hidden. I was assigned to be your guardian, your wife was the safest cover we had." My heart turned to ice. "Where is Beatrix? Where is my real wife?" Vesper looked away, a flicker of genuine guilt crossing her face. "She thinks you're dead, Caleb. We had to tell her that to keep the Sovereign Group from finding her. If you go back to her, you put a target on her back. And mine." I realized then that my perfect life was actually a high-security prison. Vesper wasn't a lover, she was a warden. Every kiss, every "I love you," had been a protocol to keep a key witness compliant and controlled. "I'm leaving," I said. "You can't," a new voice boomed. I turned to see Silas Vance, the head of my security detail, standing in the doorway. He wasn't alone. 2 other men in suits stood behind him. "The Sovereign Group just tracked your rental car to that diner in Oregon. The walls are closing in. If you leave this house, you won't make it to the end of the driveway." I looked at Vesper. I looked at the marble floors and the $50,000 paintings. I had been living a dream, but it was a dream owned by the government and hunted by criminals. "I'm not staying in this cage," I whispered. Vesper walked over to me. She leaned in close, as if to kiss me, but she whispered in my ear, "The back gate near the cliff, the code is 0922. There's a boat hidden in the cove. If you want Beatrix, you have to disappear for real this time." She pulled away, her eyes cold again. "Take him to the safe room," she ordered Silas. As they grabbed my arms, I realized Vesper was playing a double game. She was my warden, but she was also my only chance at a real life. The sound of the ocean below was a roar of freedom and terror. Following Vesper's whispered code, I managed to slip away from Silas Vance and his security team during a simulated power outage she had triggered. My heart hammered against my ribs as I reached the back gate. 0922. The lock hissed open. I scrambled down the jagged cliff path, my expensive suit tearing against the rocks. In the cove, hidden under a camouflage tarp, was a small, high-powered motorboat. I didn't look back at the mansion. I didn't look back at the life of Arthur Sterling. I pushed the boat into the surf and vanished into the midnight mist of the Pacific. It took me 3 days to reach the Oregon border, traveling by back roads and sleeping in the car I had stashed. I arrived at the cabin in the pines just as the sun was beginning to set, casting long, orange shadows through the trees. The cabin looked different than it had in the photos. The porch was dusty, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. But there was smoke rising from the chimney. I stepped onto the porch, my boots creaking on the wood I had once sanded with my own hands. The door opened. Beatrix stood there. She was wearing an old flannel shirt, one of mine, and her blonde hair was messy, just like in the pictures. She looked at me, and for a long moment, the world stopped. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just whispered one word. Caleb. I'm home, B, I said, my voice breaking. She collapsed into my arms. It wasn't the polite, measured hug of Vesper. It was a desperate, bone-crushing embrace. This was the spark I had been looking for. This was the memory my body had kept even when my mind had lost it. We spent the night talking by the fire. Beatrix told me how the men in suits had told her I died in a workplace accident. She told me how she had mourned me for 2 years, never quite believing I was truly gone. But our peace was short-lived. They won't let us stay here, I told her, looking at the dark woods outside. The sovereign group, the people I was supposed to testify against, they know I'm awake now, and the government wants their witness back. Then we run, Beatrix said, her eyes flashing with a fierce light. We've done it before, Caleb. We can disappear into the mountains. I'd rather live in a tent with you than in a palace with a stranger. As dawn broke, the sound of heavy tires crunching on gravel echoed through the valley. They were here. I looked out the window and saw 3 black SUVs. But they weren't Silas Vance's team. These men were wearing tactical gear and carrying heavy weapons. The sovereign group had found us before the government could. Get in the cellar, I whispered to Beatrix. No, she said, grabbing a heavy iron fire poker. I'm not losing you again. I realized then that the sexy, perfect wife in Malibu would have waited for instructions. But Beatrix was a partner. We didn't have guns. But I knew this cabin. I knew every loose floorboard, every hidden compartment, and every trap I had built into the mountain path to keep the coyotes away. As the front door was kicked in, I didn't feel like a tech entrepreneur. I felt like Caleb Thorne, and I was going to protect my home. The first mercenary through the door didn't expect a carpenter's welcome. As the wood splintered, I pulled a heavy lever I had rigged behind the bookshelf. A massive stack of seasoned oak logs cascaded down, pinning the lead man to the floor. Beatrix didn't hesitate. She used the distraction to shove a heavy oak table against the doorframe, creating a temporary barricade. Caleb, the back window, she shouted. I saw a red laser dot dancing across the kitchen cabinets. I tackled her to the floor just as a hail of bullets shattered the glass. These weren't men looking to talk. The sovereign group wanted me erased before I could ever reach a courtroom. We retreated through the floor hatch I had built into the pantry, a narrow tunnel leading out toward the shed. As we crawled through the damp earth, I realized that my amnesia was almost entirely gone. The adrenaline had unlocked the vault. I remembered the sovereign group's leader now, Julian Vane, a man I had once worked for as a consultant before I realized his tech empire was a front for international arms dealing. We emerged into the cool morning air behind the shed, but we weren't alone. Vesper was standing there, leaning against a tree, a suppressed pistol in her hand. She wasn't wearing her Malibu silks. She was in full tactical black. You're a hard man to keep track of, Caleb, she said, her eyes scanning the woods behind us. Are you here to finish the job? I asked, shielding Beatrix. If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have given you the boat code, Vesper snapped. She looked toward the cabin, where the mercenaries were regrouping. I'm burned. The agency found out I helped you. Now I'm on Vane's hit list, too. If we want to survive the next 10 minutes, we have to work together. The 3 of us moved like shadows through the pines. Vesper provided the firepower, and I provided the knowledge of the terrain. We led Vane's men into the Dead Man's Gorge, a narrow pass where the spring snowmelt had made the ground treacherous. From the ridge above, I saw him, Julian Vane himself, standing by his SUV, barking orders into a radio. He looked exactly as I remembered, arrogant and untouchable. I have the files, Julian. I shouted, my voice echoing off the canyon walls. I held up the small wooden box from the attic, though it only contained the lavender and the receipt. Vane signaled his men to stop. He looked up, his face twisted in a sneer. You have nothing, Caleb. You're a broken man with a broken brain. I remembered the encryption key. I lied, my heart racing. It's 0922. The same code your pet Vesper used for the gate. She didn't just help me escape, she's been selling your data for months. Vane turned his gaze toward Vesper, who who stood a few feet away from me. The seed of doubt was planted. In the world of the Sovereign Group, suspicion was a death sentence. Vane pulled his own weapon, but Vesper was faster. The gunfight was short and brutal. When the smoke cleared, Julian Vane was down, and his remaining men had scattered into the forest. Vesper stood over Vane's body, her expression unreadable. She looked at me, then at Beatrix. "The agency will be here in 20 minutes, Vesper said, wiping a streak of blood from her cheek. "They'll take the files. They'll take Vane. And they'll try to take you back to Malibu." "I'm not going," I said, taking Beatrix's hand. Vesper sighed and pulled a small silver drive from her pocket. "This contains the real evidence. Give it to the first agent you see. Tell them I died in the crossfire. If they think I'm dead, they'll stop looking for me, and if you're lucky, they'll leave Caleb Thorne alone in his cabin." She disappeared into the trees before I could say thank you. 6 months later, I woke up at 6:30 a.m. There was no sound of the Pacific Ocean, only the chirping of birds in the Oregon pines. The air smelled of cedar and fresh coffee. I turned over. Beatrix was asleep next to me, her blonde hair messy against the cotton pillowcase. She wasn't a sexy wife from a movie, she was the woman who had fought beside me in the mud. I didn't have a mansion or a billion-dollar company. I had a workshop full of sawdust and a life that was finally, truly mine. I didn't need to force a smile anymore. My name is Caleb Thorne. And for the first time in 2 years, I know exactly who I am. Thank you for learning English with us. See you in the next video. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel Storyline English, and turn on notifications to receive more emotional English learning stories in the future.